The Minecraft world record you're watching on the screen right now is not real. In fact, just about every possible aspect of this clip was faked in order to trick the entire Minecraft community. But why on earth would I ever do this? Am I a terrible person? Well, maybe. But that's besides the point. You see, 2 weeks ago from today was April Fool's Day, and I wanted to take things one step further. In order to pull this whole thing off, I first had to come up with a concept of something that, if it was real, would theoretically be faster than Minecraft's world records in bridging. Because of just how fast bridging records are, I really only had one option to turn to in order to gain inspiration, and this was from hackers. Hackers will often use damage to boost themselves really far or simply just fly in general, but how on earth was I supposed to convince an entire community of experienced players that fly hacking was now a legit thing you could do? Well, as it turns out, it was actually really easy. In order to pull it off, I found a tiny little random piece of info for Minecraft's GUI called pre-render errors, and then created an entire story around how this could be manipulated into making your player take fall damage by crashing into a block as he bridged. I initially thought this wasn't all that believable, but after receiving several DMs of people begging me to teach them how to do it because they simply couldn't figure it out, I realized I was onto something. The next step in my plan was to come up with an actually believable story, which took me a dangerously long amount of time before I had something that felt realistic. I finally settled for the idea that players could lag out their game to an extreme extent in order to make themselves place blocks in a tick later than they normally should, and their player would already be in the hitbox for this ghost block and take suffocation damage, causing them to be boosted forward to the end. The riskiest part of my whole story was saying that this was impossible to do on multiplayer servers, though my excuse for this was that you were not allowed to have any ping, and it turns out most players ended up believing that anyway. And with a believable concept and an explanation, I was ready to begin faking the clips. In order to make the clips as believable as possible, I reached out to some of Minecraft's best bridgers, Dugile and Enzoy, and filled them in on what exactly I was doing so that they could help me get clips to make it extra believable. This ended up being an amazing idea, as a lot of players questioned who the clips were from, and when I told them it was from players like Dugile or Enzoy, they ended up believing me a lot more often. But you might be wondering how exactly these clips got faked if I wasn't the one bridging. I worked with Dugile and Enzoy to come up with the idea that we would do a 4-block flat into 5 speed tellies instead of the normal 6. That way we could create an extra large gap to jump across, and once they jumped off to perform the death bridge, all they were really doing was flying to the end in an angle that made it look somewhat believable. At this point I started to doubt myself because I wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to pull it off with clips that looked as unbelievable as these. But as it turns out, I'm an absolute master at editing, so what I did is I threw these clips into Premiere Pro, and after adding a health bar, a damage sound effect, and some shake and zoom, the clips started to look quite a bit more real. It was at this point in the story that I decided to send out a bunch of these clips as test batches to see how believable people found these to be. I sent the clips out to a bunch of your favorite YouTubers such as Bedless Noob and Montclair Bear, and well, no one really believed me. A little while later, Bedless Noob ended up telling me that someone tried to use this on his server, but I'll get into that story later. For now though, my main goal was to recreate another clip of death bridging, only this time making it far more believable. I ended up deciding that a replay mod shot of this happening would be way more believable than a first person clip, simply because they're much harder to fake. This turned out to be the most difficult part of the entire process, and this is where the story gets absolutely insane. You see, I have a friend named Hucky who owns a Minecraft bridging server called ProBridge, and when I hit him up and explained exactly what I wanted to do, he was totally on board to help me by any means necessary. When I logged on, he literally shut down the entire server so that just me and him were online, and then we got right down to business. The first step in our plan was how to fake my player taking damage mid-bridge, because up until this point this had only been done using effects in Premiere Pro. The first one we tested out was the smite command, and while this definitely made me take damage, it also caused a massive lightning bolt to appear on the screen, and for obvious reasons that wasn't really going to work. Our second failed attempt was to put me into God mode and then try using /kill, but as it turns out God mode isn't good enough for /kill and I still ended up dying. The final command that ended up working was the /effect instant damage command that caused my player to take damage on the spot, but not quite enough to kill me. Looking back, he probably just could have been invisible and punched me with his fist. I guess we just weren't smart enough to figure that obvious answer out. After this point, we ran into a huge issue because the commands wouldn't actually work inside of the fast bridger mode, and in order to work around this, we had to duplicate the entire bridging island and place it into the spawn lobby where commands could be done. From there, all I had to do was bridge over and over again until finally I got 3 tellies, and when I turned to make the final jump, that's where the magic happened. The effect got applied to me and I took a hit of damage, and right as the damage applied to my player, I flew all the way to the end island, and the final turnout was a very realistic looking clip. And after gaining the trust and so much help from the owner of this server, I did what any reasonable player would do, and I went over and spawned a bunch of pigs on everybody's island so that they couldn't bridge. But all of this work would be good for nothing unless I could get the video on April 1st, which I ended up managing to do, and to my surprise, so many people ended up believing it, including a bunch of known and very advanced bridgers. I even ended up receiving a random DM from Bedless Noob, which included a clip of a player using what looked to be death bridging on his bridging server, and allegedly when the player was asked what he was doing, he told them that he just followed my tutorial exactly. To this day I literally have no idea who that guy was, but me and Bedless New both agreed that that guy deserves the world record title. For what started as a simple April Fool's prank, this ended up convincing way more people than I ever could have imagined, and 2 weeks late, I have to say, happy April Fool's Day. If you did end up enjoying, please do consider subscribing because we are getting really close to YouTube rank. But with that being said, I really do hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.